All right, welcome back guys. Now we're gonna go over some camera basics here at Two Rivers. So first things first, I'm gonna show you how to turn the camera on and off. So this camera and the other camera are identical bodies. They do have different lenses on them, but the bodies are the exact same, work the exact same, and we've set them up the exact same way. So first things first, you want to flick this switch right here up to camera. Don't turn it to lock. It'll still turn it on, but if any of the settings are off, you cannot change them if it's in the lock position. And then don't flick it down. That turns it to media mode. And if you go into media mode, essentially all you're going to see is any kind of clips that have been recorded to the camera, and 9 out of 10 times there's not going to be anything there. The second thing to go over is the lens. So for the lens on camera 1, we have a Canon 70-200, and it's got a 2x extender on it, which technically makes it 140 by 400, so that we can get some tighter shots. So on this camera, or this lens, front ring is a focus, the back ring is your zoom. Now on the other camera, we have this guy, which is a Sigma 70-200. So it's essentially, it's the same kind of lens, it's the same zoom, focal length, it's the exact same aperture, but instead of the front being the focus, it's actually the zoom, and the back is the focus. So that part's a little tricky. Some things you might need to touch, given if things have changed or we've taken the cameras on a shoot and forgot to set them back. An important one would be an ISO button, which is right here, your ISO. It's number 5 on the side of the camera. If you press that, it brings up the option on the screen, and it allows you to basically change the gain of the camera for brightness. Another one would be, there is a white balance button, which is down, it's kind of in a weird spot. There's a little record button on the side of the camera, and it's down here, there's 2 buttons. And one has got index and one says white balance, it also says play pause. The white balance is to get the color temperature correct, which is a big deal in our room because the lights we shoot, like what I have right now, shoots at a completely different white balance than the lights on the stage, which the lights on stage are about 2700 Kelvin, which is super warm and orangey looking. The light I have in front of me is shooting at 5600, which is more of like a natural white light. It looks like a cloudy day. Another one to know is there's a display button here on the side. It's labeled 7. There's also a display button, actually the exact same one up here on the monitor. This will basically, if you click it, will just remove some of the clutter on the screen that you might see that you're like, I don't need to know this. And you have a bunch of clutter on your screen or your monitor. Sometimes it can be hard to frame things properly because you might actually shift your framing off based on how much stuff is on one side of the screen or the other. A very important one to know is on these cameras, I'll turn it now. There is the side grip right here. There's a little dial right here on the top. This little dial actually controls the aperture, which is the iris blades inside, which means it can open them up to let in more light, or it can close it down and make it darker. This is an important one to know, this little dial here for aperture, because this is one we probably would need you to touch. That's usually the first thing we're gonna go to get the exposure correct on the cameras. So the screen on these cameras, it's a little wacky right now. We're trying to get some nice monitors, like some big monitors to put on, but everything's on back order because everybody else apparently is shooting video now in a pandemic world. So these monitors are pretty much fixed. They can tilt up and down a little bit, and that's about it. That's probably what we prefer that you guys only do with them, is just tilt them up and down. They really can't turn in at all. They actually have a little guard you can't really see that's in here that keeps them from pushing in more. And then they can turn out a little bit, but I don't know why you would need that really. But they can tilt up and down depending on like if you're sitting, standing, your height. It can make viewing a little more comfortable. Another thing to take note, I actually have to turn around right now, but the tally light up here, this is an important thing to know. So the tally lights are an indication of if you're live or not. If they're red, like if your tally light is red, you're currently live on the switcher, which means you're live on the program feed. So even if you can't see yourself in the house, it means you're live on the stream. If your tally light is green, it means you're in the preview, which means your camera's about to come next, more than likely. Not 100% of the time, might change our minds when we're directing, but most of the time, green will mean your camera's up next. And then if it's off, it just means your camera's not selected at all on the switcher, which isn't the big deal. It just means we're probably on the stage cams or something else. Another thing to go over, this goes with the cameras, are our comms. These guys are great. They're just all-in-one headsets. So you've got a battery compartment on the right side. Actually, it can be the right or left. You can wear them either way. And then you've got your microphone on the other. So the way you do these is the battery just clips in here. There's a little arrow on the battery and you just clip them in. And these are pretty self-explanatory. They just click open and shut. So you put the battery in, it'll turn on automatically every time you put a battery in, and you'll know it's on because the little blue light will flash and then go solid. One thing I've noticed, and this will kind of trick you, is if you've turned these off, if the blue light is on to turn them off, you just hold the power button down, it'll turn off. But when you turn it on, all you need to do is just give it a good click and let it go. The blue will probably flash and then turn off. Just give it a second. It'll probably take it about 5 seconds and then it'll go solid. It's just syncing to the receiver upstairs. Then you have the two volume buttons up and down. When you click them, it'll make an audible beep in your ear so you'll know it's going up or down. And then for the microphone, it goes, if you put it in the upright position, that means it is muted. And anything down past about this point is unmuted. And what's nice is it goes both ways, so you can wear it on either side of your head based on comfort. Most of the time, we ask that as soon as the service starts that everybody wears their comms up unless there's something they need to tell us. Otherwise, what'll happen is if your mic is down, even if you're not talking, it'll pump in any sound around you through the rest of the headsets, and it can make it really hard for them to understand who's directing. So that's just a basic overview of the headsets and the comms we use for camera. Okay, so now I'm going to go over some basics of how to operate the camera and some terms. So traditionally, you'll have two panhandles. I'm trying to get a second one for our other tripod. They're just on backward or they're really hard to come by. But traditionally, you have 2 points for drag. So our cameras, we have on these tripods that are known as fluid heads, so they have some resistance to them, so that way they're not super loosey-goosey and prone to shaking. But the first thing you want to do is unlock the locks on the side. So this one, you want to turn them both off, and there still should be some drag. You don't want to use the locks for drag on either tripod heads. That'll wear out the locks. But you want to turn it off, and that way you can use, and you can set your drag resistance, so there's little dials with numbers. The other tripod head, it's a little easier because it's like a full ring around the bottom with numbers to see instead of a little wheel right here. Typically, you don't want to go past 2 or 3 on them. It'll get really stiff, and this older tripod here that we're trying to replace, it starts to stick a little bit. But you usually want some kind of drag, because what you don't want to have happen is where it's super loose and you're jerking. We want to shoot for things to be as smooth as possible, so you definitely want to try and make sure that you add some drag. That way you can kind of, let's see, I have to make it re-engage here a little bit. There we go. So that way you can slowly move it. Another tip that I've learned, it can be really hard to free arm good movement. I know it's tempting because you think real subtle, but a good way to do movement on the camera to keep it smooth just when following is use your body weight and kind of lean with it. And that way it helps prevent that kind of like jitter you can get sometimes, or like the stutter that'll happen when you're trying to use just one arm. I know the other camera just has right now an arm on the tripod, but you can actually like grab the tripod. Some people I know like to grab the tripod head and use it to help create more resistance, and this just kind of allows you to slowly move. Because what you don't want to do when you're following is just kind of like shaking around, moving it. You really want to keep it as steady as possible because we're shooting from far enough back in the room. You're zooming in so much, like the tiniest little shake on this camera shows up large on the screen. Especially when we have the iMac on the center screen, you really can see it. And that can sometimes be a bit nauseating for people. So like typically what we'll do for terms that you'll hear us call out, one of the first ones would be pan. So pan left basically just means turn the camera to the left. Pan right would be turn it to the right. If we say tilt up or tilt down, just tilt the camera up. If we say tilt up, and then down, we say down. If we say track somebody, we're just saying to follow them, or we might say follow. You basically just keep them in frame. It doesn't mean keep them deadlock center. That can feel a little bit weird, but try keep them mostly in the center third, or keep a part of their body in the center third. So usually we have the screen set up so that it's broken into thirds with a grid, so you know where they are and spectra to the screen. We also have a center crosshair, so that way you know what dead center is on the camera, so you're not having to try and guess. So that is a basic camera training here at Two Rivers. It's not a whole lot. Most mornings, really the only thing you're gonna have to do is walk in, unlock your tripod head, get your feel of where you want it for the resistance. For that morning, everybody has a preference of how stiff or a little bit more loose they want it. Get it set. Make sure when you're not at the camera, you lock it back, or at least the pan head, because what you don't want to do is leave it and then come back and the camera will have like rested like down on the ground, or it's kicked itself all the way back. Want to try and avoid that just in case somehow something's loose and it could fall off. But you want to lock it back. The camera should be on. If you need to turn it on, you know where that is. Just flick the power button up, turn it on. You shouldn't have to touch any of the settings. You'll know, we'll probably come down and fix them before we start service, or we'll call it out over comm. Get your screen adjusted how you wanted. Make sure you get your headset, make sure it has a battery in it, and then it can turn on. And make sure that when the countdown starts, that you put your headset on. So once you get in and you've got everything adjusted the way you want it, you should be good to go. At the end of service, on 9:30, you can leave the cameras on. Typically what we'll do is good etiquette is just take them and zoom your camera all the way out and make sure that the focus is good, and we shoot the stage wide. So just shoot, if you're on camera 1, it doesn't get all that wide because it's a tight camera, just zoom it wide to the wood. And then if you're on camera 2, which is the wider one, just zoom it all the way out and frame it so where you can see the whole band in the wood stage. That way we can usually I'll put on the wider camera, it's just a backup. So quick overview, for the lenses, you have a focus one on the front, you have your zoom on the back, the other camera, it's reversed. You have your locks on the side of your tripod. The other one, the swivel lock is actually on the front. It's a little confusing, but the tilt one, or the tilt lock is on the side still. Make sure you unlock those before using the tripod. And then you can actually use the side lock if you need to for like a message or whatever. So you don't have to constantly feel like you're pushing it up and down and adjusting it. Then make sure you get your drag set, so that way everything feels good. Your focus, you feel good. Make sure you feel good about the zoom, nothing's weird about it or off. Get your everything adjusted and you should be ready to roll. Headset on, and that's how we do it here at Two Rivers. I'll see you guys in the next one.